June Osborne didn't win. That's the truth the Testaments quietly reveals, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. Because if you walked away from The Handmaid's Tale thinking June's story ended with victory, you were wrong. What actually happened is far more unsettling. June didn't get her happy ending. She didn't escape the war. She didn't even step away from it. She evolved. And that evolution might be the most dangerous thing Gilead has ever faced. Before we go deeper, here's a quick recap so you don't get lost. The Testaments picks up after the events of The Handmaid's Tale, shifting focus away from June and onto a new generation, mainly Agnes, who is actually Hannah, and Daisy, a new character who seems disconnected at first. But very quickly, the show reveals something critical. June is still alive, still active, and more importantly, still fighting. Not on the front lines like before, but from the shadows as part of the resistance group Mayday, where she begins recruiting Daisy into something much bigger than she understands. And that changes everything. Because the biggest mistake you can make while watching the Testaments is thinking June has become less important. She hasn't. She's become invisible. And in a story like this, invisibility is power. In The Handmaid's Tale, June was always reacting. Every move she made was a response to Gilead's cruelty. She was trapped inside the system, constantly surviving, constantly adapting, constantly trying not to break. Even when she fought back, it was messy, emotional, and often desperate. But in the Testaments, something has shifted. June is no longer reacting, she's planning. And that single change transforms her from a survivor into something far more dangerous, a strategist. The show doesn't scream this at you, it doesn't make it obvious. Instead, it slips it into quiet moments, a glance, a conversation, a decision that feels small on the surface but carries massive implications underneath. Like the moment in the coffee shop. At first, it looks harmless. June is just sitting there watching Daisy. But that's not what's really happening. She's studying her, evaluating her, deciding whether Daisy is useful, whether she can be trusted, whether she can be shaped into something the resistance needs. And when June finally approaches her, it's not emotional, it's intentional. She recruits Daisy into Mayday, not as a favor, not as an act of kindness, but as part of a larger plan. And this is where things start to get uncomfortable, because this version of June is not the same person we followed before. This June doesn't just want to survive, she wants to win. And winning in a world like Gilead comes at a cost. Think about what it really means to recruit someone like Daisy. She's young, she's unaware of the full danger, she doesn't fully understand what she's being pulled into. And yet, June brings her in anyway. Not because it's safe, not because it's fair, but because it's necessary. So the question you should be asking isn't, is June still the hero? It's, are she willing to go? Because the moment a character starts thinking in terms of necessity instead of morality, everything changes. And that's exactly where June is now. The ending of The Handmaid's Tale set this up perfectly, but most people didn't realize it at the time. Yes, Boston was liberated, yes, the commanders were taken down, but one crucial piece of the story remained unresolved. Hannah. June's daughter was still trapped inside Gilead, and as long as Hannah was there, June's story could never truly end. That wasn't a loose thread, that was a setup. Because now, in the Testaments, everything revolves around that single objective, getting Hannah out. But here's the twist. June can't do it directly anymore. She's no longer inside Gilead. She can't just walk in and fight her way through. The battlefield has changed, and so her strategy has to change with it. That's where Daisy comes in. Daisy isn't just a new character. She's a tool, a bridge, a way in. Through her, June can reach places she physically can't. Through her, June can influence events inside Gilead without exposing herself. And most importantly, through her, June can get closer to Hannah. But again, this comes at a cost, because Daisy isn't just entering a dangerous situation, she's being placed there, and June is the one placing her. That's not the action of someone who's simply trying to help. That's the action of someone who's playing a long game, and long games require sacrifices. This is where the Testaments becomes much more than just a continuation. It becomes a transformation of perspective. Because now we're not just watching a victim fight back. We're watching someone who has learned how the system works and is now using that knowledge to dismantle it piece by piece. And that brings us to the most important shift of all: power. In The Handmaid's Tale, power was something June was constantly fighting against. It was something held by others, the commanders, the system, Gilead itself. But in the Testaments, June has power. Not official power, not visible power, but influence. And influence in many ways is more dangerous because it doesn't announce itself. It operates quietly. It moves people like pieces on a board. And that's exactly what June is starting to do. You see it in how she interacts with Daisy. You see it in how she positions herself within Mayday. You see it in the way the story treats her, not as the center of attention, but as a force operating just outside of it. And once you notice that, everything clicks. June hasn't been sidelined, she's been elevated. She's no longer the face of the rebellion, she's one of the minds behind it, and that makes her unpredictable. But here's where things get even more interesting, because June isn't the only one trying to change Gilead. There's also Aunt Lydia, and her approach couldn't be more different. While June is working from the outside, trying to tear the system down, Lydia is working from within, trying to reshape it. She believes Gilead can be reformed, controlled, made less brutal through guidance and structure. On the surface, that might sound reasonable, but when you compare it to June's approach, the conflict becomes clear. Lydia wants to fix the system, June wants to destroy it, and those two paths cannot coexist, which means eventually they're going to collide. And when they do, it won't just be a clash of characters, it'll be a clash of ideologies. Control versus rebellion, reform versus revolution. And right in the middle of that conflict are Agnes and Daisy, the next generation, the ones who will ultimately decide which path wins. This is why June's role matters so much, even if she's not on screen, because she represents the past. Everything that was endured, everything that was lost, everything that was fought for. And Daisy and Agnes represent the future, what comes next, what all of that suffering leads to. So when June reaches out to Daisy, it's not just recruitment, it's passing the torch. But it's also something else. It's a test, because Daisy doesn't fully understand the world she's stepping into yet. She doesn't carry the same scars June does. She hasn't experienced Gilead the same way. And that means she still has a choice June never really had. Which raises another uncomfortable question. Is June giving Daisy an opportunity or taking that choice away from her? Because once Daisy is involved, there's no going back, and June knows that. Which brings us back to the central idea. June didn't win, she adapted. She became someone who understands that in order to destroy something as powerful as Gilead, you can't just fight it head on. You have to outthink it, outmaneuver it, and sometimes outdark it. And that's the version of June we're starting to see. Not just a fighter, not just a survivor, but a strategist who is willing to make difficult, morally complicated decisions if it means achieving her goal. And that goal hasn't changed, saving Hannah. But now it's bigger than that, because in order to truly save her daughter, June might have to bring the entire system down. And that's not a simple mission, that's a war. A quiet, invisible war happening beneath everything we're watching. And June is right in the center of it, even when we don't see her, even when the story focuses on other characters. Her influence is there, in every decision, in every risk, in every step toward Gilead's possible collapse. And that's what makes her so important, because she's no longer just part of the story, she's shaping it from the shadows. And if this trajectory continues, there's one final possibility we have to consider. What if June succeeds? What if she actually brings Gilead down? What does that cost? What does she become in the process? Because people who win wars like this don't come out unchanged. They carry the weight of every decision, every sacrifice, every line they cross to get there. And if the Testaments is building toward that kind of ending, then June's story isn't just about resistance anymore. It's about transformation. The transformation of a woman who was once powerless into someone who might be powerful enough to destroy an entire system, but in doing so, might lose parts of herself along the way. And that's the real story hiding underneath everything. Not whether June will win, but what she'll become if she does.